Hi everyone, my name is Gumayel Miah and I'm one of the directors within Buzzacott's charity and not-for-profit team. In this video, I will be providing you with an overview of our Excel Academy Accounts template, a tool that we make available each year to help support you with the preparation of your annual year-end statutory accounts. Our template helps to take your Academy's closing trial balance and convert it into a set of statutory financial statements compliant with the requirements of the ESFA Accounts Direction. It may be that you'll be asking Buzzacott to assist with the preparation of your annual accounts, but you may still find it useful to watch this video to better understand the process through which your accounts will be prepared. There are actually multiple templates that we have available, including one that may be used by single Academy trusts, one for multi-Academy trusts, and even one for those trusts with subsidiaries. Your audit manager will share the most appropriate template with you. So why use our templates? For context, there are two key reasons for using these templates. Firstly, the Excel workbook helps provide an audit trail between your trial balance and your final statutory accounts. For most of our clients, the numbers will ultimately end up on a single Microsoft Word document which contains both the narrative reports from the trustees as well as the numbers. But actually, if you were to look at the Microsoft Word document in isolation, it can be quite tricky to understand the makeup of those numbers and how they've been derived. As you will hopefully see as we work our way through this session, the workbook will allow you to trace the majority of the numbers back to your source trial balance. Secondly, our template will help you produce a compliant set of accounts that meets the ESFA's disclosure requirements. We update all of our Excel templates every year to take account of the latest ESFA Accounts Direction and any new disclosure requirements contained within that. So using these templates should offer you a good level of confidence that the requisite disclosures have been considered in full. There are also a number of other advantages to using these templates. Firstly, there are built-in validation and integrity checks throughout the workbooks, which will help alert you to any potential errors in the data entry, or where numbers which should match up in different parts of the accounts are not matching. There may also be a need for late adjustments to the figures after the initial preparation of the accounts, or after the audit work has begun. These can be incorporated relatively easily using our template, and you will be able to retain a log of all such adjustments for your records. Finally, it also provides a simple way of aggregating the individual trial balances for multiple schools that you may have within a multi-academy trust. We will showcase some of these benefits in a bit more detail later in this video. So if we begin by loading up the template, we can start getting a feel for what the workbook actually looks like. If we click on the Sofa tab, on screen, you should now see what looks like a very typical statement of financial activities. You will note that this looks comparable to the example statement of financial activities contained within the ESFA's Coketown model accounts. The key difference, however, is that our template has particular cells shaded in particular colours. And these colours are quite important. The same cell colouring scheme has been used throughout the workbook. The green coloured cells are user-filled cells, which means that the relevant figures will need to be hard-typed manually by the user. What you will hopefully observe as you use the workbook is that we have tried to minimise the use of green cells as far as possible. The whole purpose of the workbook is to allow you to easily track numbers back to your trial balance, so it makes sense that the number of hard-typed figures are limited. The green cells are mainly used in areas such as staff cost disclosures, where some of the requisite information or analysis may not be available from your trial balance, or for example, the comparative information, where the audit trail already exists in the form of last year's records. On the other extreme are the blue-coloured cells. These contain a pre-filled formula which will try and grab the data needed from another location within the workbook, ultimately flowing the link all the way back to your initial trial balance. And finally, there's also a middle category, being the purple-coloured cells. These require the preparer to give a bit more thought as to the best way of pulling that data into that cell, but ideally linking back by formula wherever possible. and this is typically going to be relevant in relation to fund accounting decisions. As an example, you may have various nominal accounts on your trial balance which are used to record your donations income, but some of that income may be restricted and some unrestricted. By default, the template will assume that all of the general donations are unrestricted. But if this is not appropriate, you may need to adjust the formula in a neighbouring purple cell in order to show the correct analysis. In this case, for example, if £10,000 out of the £14,000 of donations income were restricted, then you would need to adjust for this by entering £10,000 in column H, or better yet, linking it back through to the trial balance if there are specific nominal accounts that are used to record all of your restricted donations income, such as the ALE 1218 account in this example. After making this adjustment, the workbook now shows the correct analysis of the donations income between unrestricted and restricted funds. So how is it that the numbers are populated, and where do the figures in the blue cells come from? Well, the main tab within the workbook, which will dictate where the numbers on your trial balance are mapped within the statutory accounts, is the trial balance tab. The green cells in this tab is where your raw trial balance is initially entered, i.e. columns C, D and E. And this can be literally copied and pasted from an Excel export of the trial balance taken from your accounting system. The key role for the preparer is to complete column B, the type column. This is what will determine where the numbers feeds through to within the rest of the workbook. For the template to work, you can only assign a type or enter letters here which are available from a predetermined list of codes, and that listing is included within the Key for TB Codes tab here. You will see that this tab contains a catalogue of the various different types of income, expenditure, assets and liabilities that are typically found within a set of Academy accounts. And against each of these items, there is a string of letters provided in the code column, i.e. column A. These are the letters that should be entered in the type column against the relevant nominal account in the trial balance tab. Now you may at this stage be thinking, why is column B of the trial balance tab coloured blue and not green? Well, for those of you who have used our templates in previous years and do not wish to have to go through the effort of reassigning the type for every single nominal account again, there is a facility within the workbook to help automatically populate this column by copying and pasting last year's mapped trial balance into the prior year TB or PYTB tab. The formula at column B will try and detect the type that has been assigned in last year's workbook by looking at the information provided in the PYTB tab. I've already copied and pasted last year's trial balance into the PYTB tab, and you can see that we have also copied across the type code that was assigned against each individual nominal account used last year. If we head back to the trial balance tab, I will now go ahead and enter this year's trial balance as taken from the Academy's accounting system. So here we have an export of that trial balance, and what I will do is simply select the trial balance, copy it and paste it into the relevant columns of the trial balance tab here. If we now scan down columns A and B, we can see that the template has managed to successfully grab most of the mapping information that was used last year from the prior year TB tab, so the type column is largely completed. We can see here, however, that one of the items, the prepayments account, has not been successfully assigned a type code and has returned an error. But the remainder looks solid, albeit subject to a quick sense check needed by the preparer. Now, it may be that the prepayments nominal is a new code on the ledger this year, or it may be that the balance of prepayments was nil last year. Whatever the reason may be, at the moment, if we head to the debtors disclosure note, i.e. note 13 to the accounts, we can see that the prepayments balance is currently showing as nil and not the 200,000 as recorded on our trial balance. And that is because the type hasn't been correctly identified within the trial balance tab. So if we head back to the Key for TB Codes tab, we can try and search for through our catalogue for the word prepayments to help determine what the appropriate code would be. We can see here that the correct code to enter would be PRE for any prepayments and accrued income. If we head back to the Trial Balance tab and now enter the letters PRE in the type column, you will see that column A of the Trial Balance tab has now automatically updated itself to say yes, the code entered is valid. You will notice that if you do make a typo, an error will continue to be returned, and it's therefore really important that a yes is returned in the first column. As a quick tip, if your accounts are not balancing, then one of the first checks that you should do is filter column A for any no answers to check if there has been a typo in entering any of the data within this column. Now that we have entered the correct code, if we head back to the debtor's disclosure note, you will now see that the 200,000 prepayments figure is now being correctly returned in the right place within this note. If I now click on the cell where the prepayments figure is being returned, we can take a look at the formula bar and see how the workbook has actually determined what to return within this cell. It's the formula that's used throughout this template to basically ask Excel to add up all the figures within the Trial Balance tab that has been assigned a particular type code. The type code that's being searched for are essentially the letters that appear at the end of this formula. For the preparer's convenience, at column T, we have made a note of the relevant type code that is being searched for by the formula within that specific row to save you having to look at the formula in each cell manually. So we can see here, for example, that the code DEBO is being searched for the other debtors in the other debtors line. So I mentioned earlier that there may be a need to make further adjustments to the numbers after the work on the accounts has begun. Any such adjustments can be recorded in either the Accounts Journal tab or the Audit Journal tab, depending on whether the adjustment was identified during the accounts preparation phase or during the audit phase. So continuing with the example we were just going through, say for example, as the accounts preparation work was progressing, we had realised that the year-end insurance prepayment had been overstated by £5,000. No problem, if we head over to the Accounts Journal tab, we can now start populating the correcting entry. I've already started recording the correcting journal that is needed, but there are a couple of bits left to complete. The key to this is making sure that the nominal ledger code is entered correctly and that the journal value is accurately captured. Here we will enter the £5,000 needed on either side, and hopefully if we head over to the Trial Balance tab now, you will see that within the prepayments row there is a £5,000 credit adjustment for the prepayment now appearing within the Preparation Journals column of the Trial Balance. As I say, it's really important to get the nominal code correct. If for whatever reason there is a transposition error that is made within this, say for example I had entered 02 instead of 20 at the end, you will see that when we head back to the Trial Balance tab that the journal was no longer being correctly reflected as this formula has not found any journal entries for this particular nominal code. If we head back and change this back to 20, you will now see that the Trial Balance has once again picked up the £5,000 adjustment. But importantly, if you remember the £200,000 worth of prepayments we initially reported within our debtors disclosure note, this is now reduced by £5,000, reflecting the £5,000 prepayment adjustment that has now been made. In this part of the session, we just wanted to take a bit of time to look at one of the most important disclosure notes within the financial statements, the funds disclosure note. Now, it's very unlikely that the way your accounting software will export the results for the year to a trial balance will provide the full analysis needed to be able to easily map the movements on individual restricted and unrestricted funds during the year using the trial balance alone. So a more careful review of this disclosure will be needed by the preparer here. Our template is set up to make certain assumptions regarding the fund movements, but those assumptions may not be accurate or appropriate for your circumstances. To be fair, the first two columns should be relatively straightforward. The balance brought forward is a green coloured cell and will be hard typed using last year's accounts. And the income should generally be mapped to the correct row depending on how detailed your chart of accounts is. It's really the third column, the expenditure column, where a bit more attention is needed. As an example, the template is set up to make the assumption that the pupil premium income will have been fully expended in the year of receipt. This may not be appropriate for Academy Trust. It may be that you haven't spent all of that money down, in which case you will need to find an alternative way of linking or amending this formula to show the true position. Similarly, there are typically various rows within the Restricted Fixed Assets Fund section of this disclosure note, depending on how your tangible fixed assets have been financed. But the trial balance will likely only show the total depreciation charge for the year by class of fixed asset rather than by funding source. You may therefore need to determine the best way of allocating this depreciation charge for the year between rows 38 and 41 of this disclosure note. Just to round off this session with a few tips and a few common issues. Firstly, there is a guidance tab contained within each template workbook, a tab where everything that I've discussed today is included, and it's well worth a read of this before you start working through the workbook, as there are a lot of important instructions contained within here. Secondly, sometimes you will see that your trial balance does not end up balancing due to a rounding difference. We can see here, for example, at cell E2 that our accounts are not balancing, but really this is a reflection of a rounding difference that's been created by the rounding formulas used within our templates. You can see here that the trial balance is effectively nil, but there is a £2,000 rounding difference that has been created. Our suggestion here would be just to identify one of the largest balances within your trial balance and to manually adjust for the difference in order to make the accounts balance. Thirdly, on the right-hand side of the Trial Balance tab, you'll also see that there's a few additional filtered columns here. Now, this is really useful if you're trying to locate a particular error or work out where a particular code has been mapped to. For example, if I wish to see just all of the balance sheet items, or if I just wish to see all of the amounts that have been mapped through to cash, you can use these columns to quickly see what the makeup of those balances are. Then finally, throughout the workbook, you'll notice there are validation checks that are being completed. Where there is something that doesn't fit or doesn't look quite right based on the formula, an error message will appear on the right-hand side. Now, it's up to yourselves to essentially look at the cause of those errors. You'll be able to get an idea of what's causing the imbalance by looking at the formula. It's generally trying to compare one item with another within the workbook and pointing out a mismatch between those two elements. Finally, please do feel free to make changes to the workbook wherever needed in whatever way is most helpful for you, but please do try and keep to using the same formulas and principles as for the rest of the workbook. The more you start adding in hard-typed figures, the more difficult it becomes to keep a clear audit trail. Thanks very much for watching this video. We hope you found it useful. Please feel free to check out some of the other videos within this series.